You're listening to the Everything Jewish 10 Minutes at a Time podcast, where you'll learn about every Jewish topic imaginable in about 10 minutes. Before we dive in, let me confess something. My Hebrew pronunciation is about as trustworthy as autocorrect when you type shalom and it turns into salmon. Sometimes I nail it, sometimes I sound like I'm ordering at a sushi restaurant. So if you hear me say Dybbuk in a way that sounds more like debit card, please forgive me. Today's topic is the Dybbuk. Yes, the spooky, mischievous, ghostly roommate that nobody invited, but somehow shows up anyway. If you've ever wondered what happens when Jewish folklore gets a little bit horror movie flavored, buckle up, because the Dybbuk is here to haunt your imagination. Think of it as a mashup between Ghostbusters, The Exorcist, and your bubby's scariest bedtime story. We're going to talk about what a Dybbuk is, where the idea comes from, why it's stuck around in Jewish culture, and how it still pops up today, from folklore to theater to Hollywood films. So what exactly is a Dybbuk? Picture this, a restless soul that, instead of moving on to the afterlife, decides to crash at someone else's body like a squatter in a vacant Airbnb. The word Dybbuk comes from the Hebrew root dbk, which means to cling or to stick. Yep, it's basically the world's creepiest clingy ex. According to Jewish folklore, a Dybbuk is the disembodied spirit of a person who did something pretty bad while alive, or who died tragically. Instead of ascending peacefully, the soul latches onto a living person, sometimes causing physical illness, sometimes emotional distress, and sometimes just chaos. And here's the kicker. The possessed person usually doesn't get to choose whether they're suddenly the star of this unwanted soul roommate sitcom. The Dybbuk concept gained traction in Jewish mystical tradition, especially through Kabbalah, which spends a lot of time exploring the afterlife, souls, and what happens when things don't go according to divine plan. Now, you might be thinking, wait, isn't this basically a Jewish demon possession? Sort of, but not exactly. Unlike demons, which are usually considered separate evil entities, a Dybbuk is a human soul gone rogue. Imagine Casper the Friendly Ghost's evil twin who forgot how to be friendly. The idea wasn't just to scare people. In traditional Jewish communities, the Dybbuk also functioned as a way to explain unusual or disturbing behavior. If someone started acting strangely, talking in a different voice, thrashing around, or blurting out secrets, people might think, oh no, that's not them. It's a Dybbuk. In a world without psychiatry, neurological diagnoses, or Dr. Phil, a supernatural explanation filled in the gaps. Of course, that doesn't mean people didn't take it seriously. Stories tell of exorcisms led by rabbis, often involving prayer, blowing a shofar, or using holy names of God to banish the spirit. So yeah, before horror movies, there were rabbinic exorcists. The Dybbuk really made its cultural splash in the early modern period, when Jewish communities in Eastern Europe were living in tight-knit shtetls with strong oral traditions. Word traveled faster than TikTok trends, and spooky tales spread quickly. One of the reasons the Dybbuk story stuck was because it wasn't just about fear. It also tied into deep Jewish ideas about justice, repentance, and unfinished business. A soul might become a Dybbuk if it had unresolved sins or if someone hadn't properly atoned before death. That gave the story moral weight. The Dybbuk wasn't just a creepy ghost. It was a reminder that actions have consequences even beyond the grave. It's like the Jewish version of karma, with a side of goosebumps. Plus, these stories often included a rabbi who could defeat the Dybbuk, showing the power of holiness over chaos. So, while the tale gave people chills, it also gave them hope that good could win out. If you've ever heard of the play The Dybbuk by S. Ansky, that's probably where the image of the Dybbuk really cemented itself in modern Jewish imagination. Written in 1914, it became one of the most famous Yiddish plays ever. The story centers on a young woman possessed by the spirit of her dead lover right before her arranged marriage. It's tragic, romantic, and spooky all at once. Basically, Shakespeare meets The Exorcist. The play was such a hit it traveled the world, got turned into movies, and even inspired operas and ballets. For many people, the Dybbuk was their first introduction to this Jewish legend, and it gave the story a dramatic flair that stuck around. The play framed the Dybbuk not just as a monster, but as a symbol of love, loss, and the tension between tradition and desire. So instead of just scary folklore, it became deep, haunting art that audiences still study and perform today. You might be wondering, did people actually believe in Dybbuks? Or was this just scary campfire talk? The answer is both. Some Jews, especially those steeped in mystical Kabbalah, really did see Dybbuks as part of the spiritual world. They believed rabbis could and did banish them. Others saw the stories more symbolically, a way to explain the unexplainable. In that way, Dybbuks weren't so different from the boogeyman or urban legends we tell today. Think of Slender Man or Bloody Mary, those figures teenagers dare each other to summon in mirrors. Do people really believe? Maybe, but the story takes on a life of its own, shaping culture, jokes, and shared fears. Dybbuks operated in that same liminal space between belief and storytelling. And whether literal or symbolic, they gave Jewish communities a language to talk about guilt, grief, and what happens when people's lives feel unfinished or unjust. Of course, no folklore stays locked in the past. The Dybbuk has marched right into modern pop culture like it just discovered Instagram. Hollywood horror movies like The Possession, 2012, use the Dybbuk as their monster of choice. In that movie, the spirit lives inside a mysterious box, which is loosely based on a real object known as the Dybbuk box. Spoiler, that box has been bought and sold on eBay, so apparently even evil spirits can't escape online shopping. Beyond horror films, the Dybbuk shows up in TV shows, novels, and even video games. It has become one of those crossover legends, moving from Jewish folklore into the wider pop culture playground. That's kind of impressive when you think about it. Not many Yiddish words make it onto the big screen, but Dybbuk managed to sneak in there right next to bagel and chutzpah. Only this time it's giving people nightmares instead of brunch. The Dybbuk also raises bigger questions about the soul and the afterlife in Jewish thought. Judaism doesn't focus as much on heaven and hell as some other religions, but it does wrestle with the fate of the soul. The idea of a Dybbuk suggests that souls can get stuck, needing resolution before moving on. That fits with Jewish concepts like tikkun, or repair, and the importance of making amends. If someone didn't fix what they broke in life, their soul might linger uncomfortably. That's a heavy theme, but wrapped in ghost story clothing, it became more accessible. Instead of abstract theology, you had a dramatic tale you could picture. And let's be honest, possessed villagers screaming in Yiddish is a lot more memorable than a dry lecture about metaphysics. The Dybbuk legend turns spiritual questions into something vivid, frightening, and unforgettable, which probably explains why the story still resonates centuries later. Now let's talk about exorcism. Yes, Jewish tradition has its own version of ghost busting. If someone was believed to be possessed by a Dybbuk, rabbis might gather a group, recite psalms, blow a shofar, and call on divine names to banish the spirit. Sometimes they would even negotiate with the Dybbuk, demanding it state who it was and why it was clinging on. The idea was to help the soul move on, almost like spiritual customer support. Hello, Dybbuk? You've reached Rabbi Help Desk. Let's fix your eternal glitch. These rituals were meant to restore balance, not just scare people. And while we might see it today as folklore, for the people living in those shtetls, it was serious business. Imagine the tension of a whole community gathered to watch an exorcism. It wasn't just about one person. It was about the entire village confronting the idea that even death doesn't erase responsibility. So where does that leave us today? The Dybbuk continues to live in this fascinating space between scary story and moral lesson, between folklore and theology, between cultural symbol and pop culture villain. Whether you see it as literal possession, metaphorical guilt, or just a really great Halloween story with Yiddish flavor, the Dybbuk has earned its place in Jewish cultural imagination. It's clingy, creepy, and complicated, kind of like that app you tried to delete, but it keeps reinstalling itself. And maybe that's the point. The Dybbuk reminds us that some things don't let go easily, whether it's guilt, grief, or unfinished business. Thanks for hanging out with me on this spooky ride. If you enjoyed this episode, please forward it to a friend who likes a good ghost story, or leave a positive review so more people can discover the podcast. Until next time, watch out for clingy spirits. They might be closer than you think.